Hey, what's up and welcome back. So today we're going to have a support video for the Practical Multi-Item Sorter version 4.0. And in this, I'm going to go over some corrections to the tutorial that I put out. And then we're going to go through some troubleshooting checklists and things to think about when you're debugging your system. And then eventually we'll get into a few fixes / upgrades to the system. Just little ones that I think are a little more critical. So this is going to be the first video in a series of 3. In the next video, I'm going to go over how to update this system to version 4.1, which is honestly just a small little change to the back end and tweaking some of the numbers in the barrels, and that's just going to be a lag optimization thing. And then the third video in the series is going to be how to build version 4.2, which is essentially rebuilding these entire slices to use compare mode or subtract mode rather than compare mode, and that will fit in the same form factor as this one, so you won't have to change any of your builds or anything, but it'll be significantly less laggy. Alright, so let's just start with a few corrections here. The first and most noticeable one is on the back side here of the tutorial. I missed a block. So right above this redstone that's on this barrel in the green slice, you need a solid block. So when I actually did the tutorial, I only built out 2 slices, and if I had built a third, I would have noticed this. But this has been tripping a lot of people up. So you see how this redstone connects here between the slices? We don't want that. So if you put a solid block over it, you see it cuts that off, and we're good to go. If you were building off the Lightmatic, you could see I already have these in this build over here. So anybody who was keen and kind of watched the fly around here would have noticed this extra block. So that's probably the first and most important change. Next up, some people commented that I seem to be missing a block down here. This one is not critical, but in the actual build over there, I have a block here instead of redstone dust, and this doesn't really change the functionality of the slice, but it does reduce redstone dust, which reduces lag. So that's probably a good change to implement. Do note that when you change that, it will drop one of these items out if you don't change it quick enough, and it's kind of hard to change it quick enough if you're not in creative. So yeah, see, this one lost one of the items here. So definitely lock this up. So if we just like grab a redstone block and lock it like that before you change it, it will help maintain the filter state and everything. So yeah, that's a easy fix. Next up, there's the double wide storage that I showed. I showed that there would be an option here to, I guess, do something like this, or you take a hopper and you face it in like that, and you get rid of these, and then you do 2 wide ones. So this does not always work, and I didn't test it thoroughly enough, but you see there's 2 hoppers drawing out of this chest here. We can't always guarantee that it will draw out of this one first. So to solve this, you can still do the 2 wide thing, just you need to drop it down one instead. So instead of having this top layer chest, you'll have to go down one further and go like that. And then this over here will have to point to the side. So let's just put a barrel here like that. And then this one will point over here. And then you can just repeat these downwards like so. And so now we've lost a little bit of height here, but now we have 2 wide double storage, and that's how this conversion would need to be made. Just put this back to normal. All right, it's going to take a second here, and then we'll turn this one back over here, and that's back how we had it. Yeah, so that's just a little fix if you wanted to have like the 2 wide double chest storage. Then the next problem I had, and this is in the download Lightmatic or schematic, is this hopper right here is facing the wrong direction because I cloned and turned these things. So we just want to face that into the rest of those so we have one continuous line there. All right, next up, people were complaining that items weren't showing up when they were being sorted, and that is because this third dropper up here has a couple snowballs in it. If you built it from the schematic or copied it or just loaded up the world, that was probably the issue. What happened is one of these snowballs would get kicked out instead of your item because it chooses randomly, and then your item would be waiting here, and eventually it would go through. But you might notice that it was missing from your sorting and then wondering why that was. So yeah, that kind of wraps up all the corrections for the tutorial, and now I'm just going to kind of go over a little checklist of what you should double check before posting comments or complaining that it doesn't work, essentially. So we're just going to start from the very beginning, and I'm going to go over some of the most common things. So we're going to start in the back here with this magenta circuit. This is the unloader. So one thing some people missed is this minecart here. This was not in the materials list, but it is needed. You have to set this minecart on a weighted pressure plate. It can be gold or iron, doesn't matter, but it has to be a weighted version. The reason that is because it gives a signal strength less than 15. And if it gave a signal strength of 15, which like the wooden plates or the iron or stone plate would give a 15, it would override the detection of this when there was a inventory back here. So when a shulker box came in, the shulker box would not override the pressure plate, which it needs to do. Also, this repeater up here needs to be 3 ticks. You can get away with 2 ticks, but sometimes it goes a little bit too fast, so I found 3 is the safest, but 1 definitely won't work because it'll spit out this block, and then you won't be able, it'll just stop the system dead. So make sure that's on 3 ticks. All right, now the elevator over here, we're gonna make sure that this comparator here is on subtract mode. It's a fairly simple clock here, but you definitely have to make sure this is on subtract. Otherwise, if for some reason this fills too fast and gets full, this hopper right here, then if it's on compare, then it won't change. This 15 signal strength coming out of the repeater will not be able to shut that off, and it'll stop the clock. So yeah, the rest of it's pretty simple. Basically just follow this pattern and there shouldn't be any issues. Moving on to the pre-sorter here. So the first thing you want to do is make sure all the directions of your hoppers are correct. I've seen quite a few people come in, this top hopper's like pointing down and it completely ruins it. So you need the top one to point back into this block, the second one to point down, and then obviously this one needs to point over into the rest of the system. After that, we need to look at the hopper configuration. So this top hopper right here actually has to be configured somewhat like an item filter. So you're going to have the first slot empty, then 19 filter items. I like to name these. I use paper for my filter items, but it's going to be 19, 1, 1, 1 in the second through 5th slot. So make sure you have that, otherwise the system's not going to work. Then back here, double check this comparator is on subtract mode for the same reason we discussed before. And this repeater down here is going to be on 2 ticks. If that is different, then it's probably not going to work. However, I do note that some people on like paper servers have found this works at a different number of ticks, but I can't explain why that works because that should break it. But paper runs things differently, so maybe something to play around with. All right, then back here, this dropper needs to have 1 item in it. It doesn't matter what item you have in there, just 1 item. and that will be spitting it back and forth, and that's how we turn on and off this comparator line to lock the hopper over there. Then the composter needs 1 fill level, can't have more or less, and then make sure down here that these observers are facing the correct direction. So this one's observing this note block, and the bottom one's observing that note block. If you reverse them, it won't work. So yeah, and that pretty much wraps it up for the pre-sorter module. Now in the slices themselves, make sure again you have this solid green block that I showed earlier, and you have to do that on all the green slices. If you used a different color, it's the slice that is a little bit shorter. You see how this yellow one sticks out a bit? So the shorter slice needs that block. All right, then also make sure that all the comparators in all these slices are on compare mode, not subtract mode. And then the lower barrels, or the ones in the back here, have to have a full row of items. This can be unstackables or full stacks of stackable items. And then the ones in the front here on the top, these have to have a single item in them. And again, that doesn't matter if it's unstackable or stackable, just so long as there's one of them in there. All right, and then down below here, we'll see there's some glass. This glass is necessary. You can get away with using half slabs, but it has to be a non-solid block. So for the green slice, there's 3 locations, 1 in the back, and then these 2 up front here. And for the yellow, if I can work my way in here, there's just these 2 up in the front. So you have the same as the green slice, just up in the front, and it doesn't need the one in the back. All right, give me a sec. I'm going to scroll down on my notes. All right, so I think that brings us up to the front. We have to double check the configuration in the slices. So if we look at this top hopper here, we'll see it's 64, 48, 11. So 0, 64, 48, 11. And again, you're going to want to name these. I named them filter, just so that it doesn't get confused with any paper you might put through here. And then the actual filter chest above it also needs configuration. So anything you're going to be sorting, you need 2 of in here. And this is why I can't sort unstackables. And then you're going to have to fill the rest of it up with some random item. I use black concrete and I just name it blocker, but this can be whatever. But it has to be different than what you used in the hopper below, right? So this is paper named filter, and this is black concrete named blocker. Now you can use paper for both as long as you name them differently, because then it will consider them to be a different item. But yeah, I saw quite a few people trying to use the same items in both the hopper and the chest, and that will just not work. And then once again, make sure your hoppers are facing in the correct direction down here. Again, the top one is going to be pointing into this block. And then you're going to have one pointing down and then over into the dropper tower. And then these droppers need to come all the way up and feed into this next chest here. Yep. Well, they feed back into this one. So this guy is pointing into here, and then it gets sucked down into this hopper. If it's not a match, and goes into the next system. So yeah, I think that's it for the slices. Obviously, make sure your observers are all facing the correct direction. It helps if you have a texture pack for this sort of debugging purposes, and I have one available on my site. I'll have a link to that in the description below. All right, so that is just about it. There's just one more thing I want to mention, and that's when you're testing this out, if it fails, you have to go through kind of a process to reset it before you can test it again. Otherwise, you're just going to end up continually having problems, whether you fix the issue or not. So things you want to double check after you've run a test and it's failed. Double check that all the droppers in the system are empty. So that means all these ones on each of the slices, make sure they don't have any items sitting in them, or it'll mess up your next test. And a little less important, but it's good to make sure all these droppers are empty as well on your elevator. And then on top of that, obviously make sure that your filter items are still set correctly. If you're changing stuff underneath in the slice, there's a good chance it will get depowered and you'll lose some filter items. So you just got to go grab them out of the storage and throw them back up here. Make sure they're configured like so. And then also double check the configuration of your filter chest. So those are the three things you want to do every time you have a failed test, is make sure everything is clear, and then you can be ready to start your next test. So also when you're doing testing and you're reporting issues, I'm more than happy to help people figure out what's wrong. But when you're reporting something, I need to know the first slice that it failed at, because if it failed at one of these first two slices, there's a fair chance that the issue was either you missed this block here, or you're running on a server type where this pre-sorter module doesn't function, and we'll get that in a little bit here. So yeah, I need to know, clear out your whole system, set it up for a test, run your test, and then keep an eye on which is the first slice that failed, because if it's a slice back here, then it's probably just an error in actually constructing that slice. But if it's one of these first two slices, then it might be something beforehand. Yeah. All right, so that brings us to the last section here, where we're going to do a couple upgrades. And the first one is going to be down here in this unloader module. So people were having issues where they were putting tons of items in, and it's designed to do a full double chest worth of items without jamming up, but people like to put more stuff in. So eventually these hoppers right here would end up backfilling, because you can see this hopper here sucks stuff in from above, and it has stuff pushed in from the side from the shulker boxes. So it actually fills up faster than it drains out. And that's a problem if it then backfills into this hopper, and then when this one fills up, it can no longer accept the shulker box when it breaks. So you'll have a shulker box drain out, and then it'll come down, break it, and it won't have slots available for the shulker box itself. So it'll just sit there until this one drains out, and since this one's drawing from above it, it basically never drains out, and you could despawn your shulker boxes. It's not good at all. So we're just gonna fix that by taking a couple hoppers. We'll go one below here and one facing into that, and then we're gonna take a solid block there and a comparator reading out of this top hopper here, and then we're just gonna take a couple torches and come up like this, and then a solid block. And so what this is going to do is it's going to read out of this hopper here. So when there's something sitting in here, it'll turn on this comparator, go up the torch tower, and power this piston. So as long as this has items in it, the piston won't be able to trigger the next shulker box, and that will ensure that, that'll ensure that the shulker box never gets broken when there aren't slots available for it here. So it'll slow down the system a little bit, but it will also prevent you from losing any shulker boxes. So that's a pretty easy fix. Then, as I mentioned, there is an alternate defragmenter module here, the pre-sorter, whatever you want to call it, item gate. People weren't happy with me calling it a pre-sorter for some reason. But yeah, so particularly if you're on a paper server where hoppers and all sorts of redstone works a little bit differently, you're going to want to try this other one out. If this current design is working for you, there's nothing you need to do. This is actually faster, better design if it's working. If it's not, then obviously you got to change it out, and I'm going to show you how to build that right now. So you can actually leave this front little bit the same, and we're just going to come back here and make sure I don't have any items in here. I'm going to lock this top one because we're going to use the same filter setup. So I'm just going to lock it so it doesn't get drained out while I'm working on this. And then we're just going to take from here back and get rid of everything here. Make sure you don't kill that barrel. This is another thing people forget, is this first barrel on the slice is kind of hanging off here. You do need this one. And there's also one on the other side over here that's hanging off the end slice for this comparator. Make sure you have those as well. All right, so in the back here, we're going to take a readout of this top one. So we got a comparator facing out like that. And that's going to go into a solid block with some redstone on it. And we're going to put a torch there. And then down underneath, well, we're going to have a little platform like this. And this is going to be 4 by 2. Actually, you probably don't need that one there. And then we're just going to put some redstone here, there, and there. Then we got a comparator facing this way into a solid block, and another comparator facing this way. And this just makes a like a comparator timeout clock right there. And then we just have a repeater on 1 tick facing back here, and that'll lock this middle hopper right there. And then over here, we need to make the little clock circuit. And so we're going to take a note block like that, an observer looking at that note block. And so then this redstone dust powers the block, which powers the note block, and that's how we cut off the signal. All right, so this one goes faces this note block, so then this one has to face the other direction, and we'll just take a solid block there. And then on the top, we're going to take a repeater and put it on 2 ticks. So now our loop kind of comes up here through the repeater, back down through the note block, and goes around and around like that. And this one has to be on 2 ticks, otherwise it won't sync up. So now we can get rid of this block here, and this should be the new module. So if I'm just going to, let's see, grab some items. Grab some of those, make the stacks a little bit smaller. And if I drop them in here and look at this bottom one here, we can see I've got the rail coming in, and now when it switches to the powered rails, we're going to have a long pause. See how there's nothing here, it's waiting, and then now this one comes in. In the old system, that was like a 1 or 2 tick pause. Now it's significantly longer, and that long pause is what you need because the short one was getting lost in servers that ran paper, and probably some other server variants as well. But yeah, this is much safer, but it will slow down your processing a little bit because every time you change item types, it's got to have that long pause between them. All right, so that's pretty much it. If you think I forgot something, if you have an issue that I haven't covered, please let me know in the comments below. And special thanks to all my patrons. If you want to support me on Patreon, go check that out. I'll have a link in the below section here. So, yep. Anyway, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.